Hello, welcome back to another monthly roundup and the first one of 2022. So probably far too late to say it, but we'll say it anyway. So Happy New Year. So yeah, this one is kind of a culmination of everything that's happened over the course of December and January. And great, I love having our regular audience back on again. So yeah, lighting up the chat already. Morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. So much stuff to go through as per usual. Incidentally, as Luana and I were just talking about, not as much as we would have typically thought, because we've had a kind of 8-week hiatus from this. So I think there are really 6 very clear themes that are emerging from all of the trends and changes, of which we'll summarize at the end. But yeah, before we get into all of the slides and the stuff, Luann, do you want to do a quick intro before we get into it?
Yeah, good morning. Good to see you again, Andy. It seems like it's been forever, even though you pop up in our LinkedIn feeds every Monday morning with a hello. So that's always good. Great to see everyone. Yeah, in the chat. So my name is Luann. I'm a marketer, social media specialist living in the Cotswolds in the UK. I have a great mix in my working life, in that I get to work directly with clients, supporting them. Right now, that could be universities, manufacturers, law firms, consultants, training organizations. I do also teach and train myself on social media topics. And I'm also the editor of a relatively new website, which I'm not sure I've mentioned before. It's called thelighthouse.social, and it is a roundup of social media news every week, and also lots of resources that you as a social media marketer might like to use for your planning, tools you might want to find out as well.
Yeah, brilliant website. Yeah, it's a lot of effort you put into that one. So, and you seem to have created and spun it up in a really short amount of time. So yeah, massive credits to you on that one. And me, you know who I am. I'm Andy. I'm one of the founders of Content Cal, which probably soon will be called Adobe Content Cal. So you might have heard or not, but yeah, we got bought by Adobe at the end of last year, which was fantastic news. There's some very exciting stuff coming, which I can't talk about right now, but hopefully we'll talk about very soon. But anyway, that's what Content Cal looks like. But as is the format for every time we do this, every single month, for those of you that are new, I always like to kind of preface it with this bit where we'll talk lots about all the trends, the changes and new updates. This isn't a view to make you feel like you're getting fear of missing out and trying to jump on every latest thing that's happening. Absolutely not. We'll always recommend doing fewer things well rather than trying to be everywhere, always. But this does give you an opportunity to understand what's happening in the broader world of social, helping you understand what's coming down the track. Maybe we want to orientate our strategies, or maybe there's new things that we could really take advantage of as part of our own strategy. But either way, don't feel compelled to suddenly do everything off the back of this. This really is just here to give us a bit of a broader perspective around everything that's going on. We start with the trends. I've got a few of them to talk about, and then Luann and myself will then dive into all of the network specific updates that you need to know. So it's been a very busy one, particularly for Instagram. So yeah, Luann will be guiding us through this. Now, I talk about this fairly regularly, and whilst for many businesses, we might think that, this is kind of irrelevant if we're not B2C or retail orientated, but this is driving a fundamental shift within social. So social media spending was up 50% year on year last year. So this is the amount of money that's being spent through social channels, not just on products, goods and services, but also through a monetization tool. So like we saw the launch of Twitter Super Follows, where people can drive subscriptions to access exclusive content through their Twitter profile. So that is all kind of in this whole social spending. And it's really driving 2 main macro trends, which is, as we're saying here, social commerce, but also the creator economy, which we're going to talk about lots more over the course of 2022. And it really is driving all social media direction. And it's the numbers that really are just too compelling for any of these social platforms to ignore. Hence the reason they're falling over themselves to launch features that help both businesses and creators monetize. So we'll talk lots about these features. But what that actually means really, and the way we should think about it, because if we're not kind of retail orientated, or we're maybe a services B2B or a non-profit, really the most important thing that this is doing for the use of social, it's meaning more people are coming to social, more people are coming to social with the mindset, not just for entertainment, but in a more of a commercially led mindset, which is very interesting for us as businesses and organizations, etc. But it's also, like we were just talking about a minute ago, driving the creator economy, which means lots of smaller communities start popping up with their own kind of microcosms of subcultures. And that's then really exciting for us as businesses, because it allows us to totally rethink how we'll target individuals by working with those smaller communities. And we're going to see that explode over the next year and beyond. And it's all driven by both social commerce and the creator economy. And as you can see here, it's going to triple in the next 3 years. And that's like the underlying fundamental trend that will be very interesting for us to think about as businesses as to how we tap into that. And that growth is coming across the world, like with most I'll put my teeth in, like with most trends that happen in the world of social, they start east and then they go west. And we're seeing that transition to Western cultures right now, where we're seeing that growth, which has started in China, now coming into US. And now, as you can see, we're seeing that in Western Europe, particularly starting in the UK. So very much it's upon us, lots of things going on. And what we're going to see in the final slide on this is that whilst the youngest generation, Gen Z, is going to drive this growth initially, the forecast is that it's very much going to start to go across a broad gamut of demographics, millennials, Generation X, etc., as it becomes more of a thing, buying and getting influenced to buy products through social. So lots of exciting trends. I talk about this very excitedly because fundamentally this really is the next gen of social, and all of these trends and changes drive social media direction, of which we're going to talk in a second.
Yeah.
I don't know, Luann, that's a lot of waffle from the start. What are your thoughts on that? Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, there's just one. If you just go back a slide. So my thought when I was looking at this slide deck was, what does this mean if I'm not in social commerce, if I'm not in retail? You know, is this important to me or not? And actually, I've used this data already myself in another session this week of actually, let's think about what this says about this audience, and that this audience of millennials and Gen Z, which is fast growing, they're driving our future. If they are going to be on the social media platforms for commerce, they're going to be on there for other reasons as well. And there's some stats out there, we'll probably share this one next month, of how different age groups are using social versus search engines to kind of do their research, find what they're looking for. And very much this younger audience is much bigger on social to find new products, research what they're looking for, whereas older generations are still a bit more heavily weighted towards the search engines. But it does show that that's going to change. And so even if you're not involved in social commerce, just seeing this trend and how important this demographic group is and where they are is relevant to all of us, I think.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. So some organic trends. So yeah, I tend to read lots of reports and only look at the ones that are deemed as statistically significant. And this one from HubSpot, the link to this is here, and I'll share the presentation after this as well. This session is recorded as well. And of course, actually, I missed some of the most important things at the start of this session. So it just shows how out of practice I am. Ask any questions in the Q&A, because Luann will be checking the questions at the end, and we'll make sure we have a lot of time for questions as well. But I'm sure most of you turn up here every month, and well, thank you for coming back again and again. And I always love seeing the chat and people conversing in the chat one-on-one, which is awesome. Anyway, this data from HubSpot was all about Instagram, and there's some really interesting organic trends on Instagram. This was a survey of about 1 million accounts, so pretty statistically significant. So there's a few things I want to call out, and Luann, I'll be calling on you for your kind of thoughts and narratives on this as we go through. But average numbers of followers per post, or I just wanted to start with this. There's nothing we can actually do with this data, but it's just sometimes reassuring to look at, 53% have less than 1,000 followers on Instagram. So whilst we might look at the accounts that we, look up to potentially and think, oh, everyone's got so many more followers than me, it's really not the case. The majority of accounts absolutely don't have a large follower base. So it's sometimes a nice kind of reality check to so kind of where you sit. But the most important stuff, which the stuff that really kind of impacts our strategy, is when we start to look at the top performing post types. Now, this data is actually quite interestingly different to some stuff that we presented in November in our roundup for some other reports. So that data showed that video performance was much lower. Now, this was data maybe 3 months ago. But so it's interesting to look at this. And this report came out early January. We know that images on Instagram are not the top performing post type. And we know that's the case. We've seen that in other data. So I think we can conclude that's the case. We know that carousel does perform well, in terms of likes and engagement. Essentially, as we all know with carousels, aka multi-image posts, you've got a couple of bites of the cherry, so to speak, where when people are scrolling back through their Instagram feed, it's likely they're going to be shown another one of those photos from your carousel. We know carousels are important, and we're starting to see an increase in frequency of people posting carousel posts as well. But then the interesting thing is video. So not too sure how much to read into this because, this is just one report, but this does start to align with Instagram's vision of becoming the video first or video centric entertainment app, which is what their head of product, Adam Mosseri, stated, I think it was about October or November last year. And there's some other kind of more poignant updates around Instagram that are coming later because he being Adam, the head of product at Instagram, teased some other things that Instagram are working on. But yeah, video now, according to this report of 1 million posts, saying that drives the best likes and the best average comments. So I'm interested in your take on that one, Luann, because that was a bit of a surprise to me.
Okay. Yeah, there's obviously a few things in here. Just to look at the questions. So someone's asking, is it B2B or B2C data? Sometimes we cover B2B, sometimes B2C. Most of these reports, like I believe this one, will be a combination of accounts overall and not a split. But do have a look at those sources afterwards. We will always cover different types of campaigns in these sessions. For me, going back to the follower size, I find that particularly interesting if you are working with or planning influencers. Yes, it is 53% under 1,000. A couple of people have asked that because in the influencer world, we've got our absolute nano influencers in that small group, but they may, it may be small, but they will be niche. They will have dedication and, a really strong community. Big is good if you're looking for awareness and your mega influencers and your celebrities, but that might not always be your objective. So for me, I find this slide interesting in terms of, influencers and working with influencers and collaborating, because that is, a key part of Instagram in particular. It doesn't surprise me that videos are most engaging because they stop people scrolling. They grab attention. They get to know, like, and trust you from engaging with it. So time will always be higher once a video starts playing than a single image in a feed. I think we've talked lots of times about how important video content is. Not always the easiest to make. Doesn't have to be face to camera. It can be graphics. It doesn't have to be you in front of a camera if you're not confident doing that. But sometimes surprised by a carousel because it takes a bit of effort, doesn't it? And you don't always spot it there. But I guess, that's what the data says. Yeah,
no, indeed. Well, I think this sets a really nice landscape for some of the video updates that you'll be talking about for Instagram in general. Post length. Now, this is always a very interesting one. I'm sure this is draw a lot of people's eyes into this one. What is the best post length on Instagram? So this data is showing you what is the average post length, and then we're going to look in what is the optimum post length according to this data. Once again, like we say with any data, this is a good guide for you if it helps inspire you. But of course, if you have data suggest otherwise, go with that, right? So if you regularly produce very long captions on Instagram and get loads of engagement, brilliant. Don't change it just because you've seen a bit of data. But if you don't have any real guiding principles around it, this can be useful. So this is quite interesting. The reality is 101 to 1,000 characters is where the vast majority of posts are sitting. That's quite a broad mix, to be honest. But you'll notice that in the much longer captions, you'll notice that there's far fewer posts created in that realm. But then when you look at the average engagement versus caption length, becomes quite interesting. So if you look at here where we've got very short captions, so 0 to 20, that doesn't perform. That's actually the worst performing. So that's kind of interesting. So there is more of a desire to read the caption on Instagram to give it context than other short form video platforms like TikTok, for example. But then what we start to see is a kind of a bit of a up and down mix, where we start to see that the engagement gets higher when we give it a bit more context, but only up to 100 characters, which is still half the length of a tweet. So very much capturing people in a very, very short amount of time is critical here. Doesn't mean that, you know, posts that have 2,000 plus, so really going into detail, there's another kind of kick of engagement when you go big with it. But the reality is, if you look at the data, because so few posts are published in that space, I'm not surprised that the data would say the average engagement is higher, because naturally there's fewer posts published. So I don't think the data is statistically significant. The thing we should take away from this is that, you know, whilst you shouldn't necessarily use this to be discouraged about creating longer captions, optimizing for shorter captions to capture people in the moment and stop the scroll is where we should be orientating towards. That's the way I take this data, unless you've got anything else to add on this, Luann.
I think it comes back to almost what is the purpose of your Instagram account. And I'm not saying that, you know, you need to only pick one of these categories of caption length for every post that you do, but looking towards the, you know, the longer length end, for me, that will be the Instagrammers that are treating it like a blog and telling stories. And actually, if I follow them and I enjoy their stuff once, I probably will keep engaging with them, which is why they're probably keeping that engagement rate quite high, even though their posts are long. So I think it's about almost finding your sweet spot. And for me, don't overthink some things like this. Don't go, right, so today with 51 to 100 and I'm going to count it. Your caption is as long as it needs to be to get across the information you need it to get across. Perhaps sometimes I would say, if it's straying into a different topic or a different area, do another post rather than trying to go, oh, if I go over 2,000, then that might work. Just think about the purpose of your account and your own context and how you feel. This is characters, Sally.
Yeah, so very short.
Yeah,
very short, half the length of a tweet.
Yeah.
More hashtags, more engagement. This is the final thing before we go into the features. We've seen lots of data around this, and it all depends how you cut the data to judge the result you'll get. And for me, this is probably the best data I've seen that really replicates this or shows this in the best light, which is fundamentally you stand a better chance of driving engagement should you include more hashtags. To be fair, this backs up data that we saw from another source published by Later in November. So it backs that up as well. So straying over 20 hashtags, you start to see engagement dip after that, because remember, you can use up to 30 hashtags on Instagram in a post. But realistically, it looks like that number peaks at 20. Now, stuffing hashtags for no particular reason. Of course, there's more context and nuance to this, because we need to make sure we're using relevant hashtags. The tool I always recommend for this is a tool called best-hashtags.com, so best-hashtags.com, and have a look at that, because that gives you the most liked and popular hashtags for Insta. I always talk about that tool because it's free and I'm cheap. So yeah, that helps you make sure you're staying relevant, staying on topic. But yeah, and don't just hashtag stuff just because you see something trending. But it's clear that the more you use, the better chance you have of driving engagement is the way I would take this. Let
me just go back, Andy, because we've got the age-old question, and it is still a relevant question, but the question of, do hashtags go in the post or the comment? And I believe that there was some research out last year. There's always research on it, but actually, I think Instagram actually said it makes no difference.
Yeah, no, exactly. There was, I definitely conflicting advice on that. I would still test, but yeah, it doesn't seem to make a huge amount of difference. But yeah, I would still test it, because it
always test
today. A role
always test.
Yeah, a rule exists today, but it might change tomorrow. Just going through this, because we'll get into the features. But yeah, best day and time to post. Very rare that you see this. Sorry for any audience outside of the UK. But it's very rare to see some kind of UK specific time zones on this, because it's usually focused in the US when we're looking at best days and times to post. And it presents some kind of really interesting statistics here. Once again, caveat to this: if you know data that what the times that work best for you, go with that. Don't just go by data. But this, when you look across a million different accounts, when you look at the averages, you see a spike very early in the morning, early on than I would have thought, actually. We've always seen this. You've always seen a spike at lunchtime, so there's always a little bump of engagement at lunchtime. But the peak engagement really is around the evening time, early evening. And then following 6 p.m., it starts to drop off. And when you look at the days, Tuesdays and Fridays seem to optimum times for engagement. We know we've always seen the weekends don't perform as well. It's not like, as you can see, there's not huge deltas between them. So you can't really go massively wrong in terms of the days, but optimizing for time is always a really useful thing to do. So the simple rule, early in the morning, midday, and then early evening. And because the actual data might shift a little bit, like it might be between 6 and 9 p.m. or between 12 and 2, or 6 p.m. in the evening and 9 p.m. Whatever the actual time that you post it, it's always within those 3 core windows that we should be thinking about when we're optimizing our time to post. But with that, Luann, let's head into what's new.
What's new? We now have Meta logo before we start with Facebook, so that is new. But yes, some new features, not too many, but actually there's core themes, as Andy said. And the first one in terms of Facebook is about live streaming. So we're going back to that topic of video, people engaging with video, features for video, and actually now having multi-person live streaming on the Facebook app as well. So nice new feature. Haven't seen it too much yet, but the feature is there for people to use. Pinning links within the live stream, I think that's always important, and actually that would be quite nice within Demio, wouldn't it? Because I can see the chat going on and people sharing the links that we're talking about, and for us to be able to pin them so that everyone can find them really easily, would be a nice feature on other platforms too.
Yeah, no, I like this feature, really useful.
Polls, we like polls, don't we? This is all those features that just make things more interactive, keeps our audience engaged, keeps them involved. It makes it less passive, so you're not just sitting back and listening to someone. So love that we've got this feature on here as well. Professional mode. So I believe this was December, Facebook launched professional mode, and this is, I believe, because a number of people were using a Facebook profile for a business or a page for themselves. People are brands in their own right and never quite sure where that should sit on Facebook. So there is now a professional mode that you could switch your personal profile on, I believe, to this professional mode. Haven't done it with mine. I'm going to keep mine closed for my friends and family, but the option is now there.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think there's always been a bit of a debate as to whether, if you're a kind of brand in your own right, whether you should have a company page on Facebook or a personal profile. This makes that decision easier. You'll get additional analytics and access to newer features like multi-person live streaming and all the live streaming stuff that Luann's just referenced. So there's definitely value-added benefits to that one, that's for sure.
Yeah, let us know if anyone has done that. It's always good to hear if anyone has added these features. Instagram, as Andy said at the beginning, Instagram is probably the platform we're going to see most changes from this year. We saw a lot last year. Their big intention of we are no longer just a photo sharing app, I think is behind all of this. And as we know, their intention to compete with TikTok.
Indeed.
That's what it's all about. They hit 2 billion monthly active users at the end of last year. And just to put this into context, even though we know that TikTok was the most downloaded app for most months, most quarters of the last 2 years, with the exception of, I checked this out, with the exception of March 2020 when Zoom was the most downloaded app. And actually at the end of last year when Instagram kind of took over TikTok again as the most downloaded app, but that was because of TikTok's restrictions in India. But Instagram hit 2 billion monthly active users. TikTok are on about 1 billion monthly active users. So even though we've talked a lot about the growth of TikTok, Instagram is still there in terms of where people are going day in, day out.
Yeah, just to clarify this as well, they haven't officially announced this figure. The only time they announced a figure was back in 2018, but this apparently was, according to Social Media Today, was leaked from some insiders. And it would make sense if Instagram were at 1 billion in 2018, 3 years later, considering their growth, it would make sense to be at that. But they've not reported it because see Facebook, aka Meta, are going through a few political challenges. So bragging is probably not something they want to do right now, but it's good to know that. It's good to see the growth.
Yeah. And again, this focus on video content, and Sophia's just posted, we'd love your feedback on, do you prefer Reels or TikToks? All video content on Instagram is looking like it's heading towards Reels. That is going to be the focus of this year.
Yeah, and I think this will then play into that data we saw earlier about how video is starting to become more engaging. I think if you spend some time in your own Instagram feed, you'll start to notice, once I tell you, you'll probably notice now, how many pieces of content become videos. So you might have initially, like maybe a few months ago, scroll your Instagram feed and much of the content that you would have been served would have been image focused. You're going to start to gradually see that become more and more focused on video as well, which might well be one of the reasons we've seen the growth of video engagement. Yeah.
New features on Reels, as we might expect, as more and more people are using it, is now being able to reply to post comments with Reels as well. So yeah, we can expect that we're going to have lots of new features within Reels over the next few months.
Yeah, definitely. I like this one as a way of like interaction, rather than like saying thanks for the comment or liking a comment. Actually, like it shows a real next level of engagement that you can reply to any comment that you get on Instagram through Reels. And it's just another way of Instagram, I think, like fueling people to start using Reels more frequently and not be so scared about doing it.
And that when we're creating the content, whatever format, that we need to be thinking about engagement and encouraging the comments as well, if that's our objective, to get that, that engagement, that interaction with people, that we need to think about that as we're creating.
100%.
Chronological feed returns. This was announced towards the end of the last year that it was happening. It has allegedly happened. Is, whether we talk about algorithms or don't talk about algorithms, we do like things to appear in order. I'm a big one for things appearing and being lined up and in the right order. So the chronological feed is back on Instagram.
Yeah, albeit it's a user preference. So whilst it's nice to think that, potentially timing becomes even more critical based on a chronological feed, but how many people will actually go into Instagram and each time change it? Who knows? But interesting nonetheless. I think this is going to be interesting from now on to have a look at our Instagram performance now versus 3 months down the line, because then we'll start to see how much impact does this change have on our post performance. Yeah, it's a fascinating one.
They'll share some data as well, no doubt. Again, this is stories. Stories are still there. We're not all automatically switching over to Reels. Stories are still useful now that we can add custom text to link stickers within stories. That is very useful because we're actually able to make changes and personalize everything that we're doing. What else have we got? Remixing. So back to videos, and I see quite a lot of these in my Instagram feed where you remix it, you go alongside someone else. A lot of them have been Adele singing. I haven't done that, but that's the remixes in my field, or dances alongside of each other. But I do think there's a lot of options here, particularly around kind of teaching people, learning things. If people are using social media platforms for learning dances, learning singing and entertainment, there is other purposes to this. And I think that now all videos are going to have this remixing option. Could get quite fun.
I mean, even because it doesn't even need to be like dancers and singing. Imagine that it's like a B2C business, and part of one of your kind of day-to-day jobs is like boxing up your product, right? And you probably got pretty fast at boxing up your product and posting it and shipping it. You could film a video of how you package a product and ask others to, do a take of that, do a remix that, and see how quickly they can pack a box as well. So just like there's things like that opens up this whole new realm of creativity as to the way that people can interact on your content, and it starts to become, a viral trend. And that this is a feature that was popularized by TikTok, and it's these things that have really encouraged that audience participation in content. That has been TikTok's masterstroke. So let's see if Instagram can pull it off too. Yeah.
Badges. Everyone likes badges, don't they? And I'm seeing these across, getting them for, most engaged on Facebook pages, and, Instagram live badges are now available as well. So getting people again engaged and about getting people to return to the content, isn't it? So they can win their badge. This is a big one. I'm hoping that the word test comes out of this one soon. For those of us that are a little bit obsessed with what the grid looks like and get a bit frustrated that you can't go back and change things or amend things later, Instagram is testing the ability to rearrange your grid. I'm looking forward to this one. Just, sometimes we do want to change things around. So I'd love this.
Yeah, me too. I think there'll be a few others on this session that will love that too.
Yes. Testing the vertical feed for stories. Again, testing. We don't always talk about testing in these sessions because we know that these platforms are always testing things. Some get rolled out, some don't, country specific as well. But interesting, again, back to that vertical feed in stories and how that could progress this year too.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes worthwhile calling out these tests because it helps think about what the direction of travel for Instagram, and you're going that full screen video experience. I'm expecting that to happen at some point this year where they just go all in against TikTok really, and the feed becomes a lesser used part of the product. That would be my prediction by the end of the year, which would then have some real impact for our content strategies on Instagram. That's for sure.
Yeah. And back to that, we talked about it a lot at the end of last year. This is the first time this year, this whole monetization area of what the social media platforms are doing, what they're introducing, how they're supporting creators and using that term creators as well. So again, this is a test that was announced in the last couple of weeks. So quite a recent test. I'm looking forward to seeing how this one goes, that you can subscribe and, actually monetize this as well. So this is quite an important test, I think, for Instagram.
Definitely agree with that one. Twitter.
Okay, so again, last year, if we were to wind back to a year ago, we were starting to go, oh, there's something called Clubhouse that everyone's talking about, or Apple users are talking about. That conversation carried on for a while. Android users got added, and then of course, because everyone was literally talking about it, because it is audio only, the other platforms started to look at these features, integrate them, and Twitter has done this more than any of the others and really focused on Spaces, to the fact that they removed fleets, their stories, and have put real focus around Spaces and added more and more features to it as the year progressed, and are still doing that. So this new Spaces icon, more features, being able to record.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting statement of intent, because we talked about them potentially doing it last year, but now they've done it. So if you open your Twitter app, it's likely you'll see like that main primary navigation is about Spaces. It goes to show like the effort and investment they're putting in that. But more Spaces stuff.
Yeah, trying out private Spaces. So again, that's interesting, isn't it? And there's some other features coming up today on Twitter around kind of people wanting to have a bit more control and not be so openly public, have your small groups testing things out. Again, something to try and work out what's going to work for you. Recording, for me, this was a big one. Not being able to record before was, it's a great feature, but if you're focused on your content and you like to repurpose your content and use it again, then you would want to record it. So that now that's on Twitter Spaces, that's a bit of a game changer, I think, for many people. Definitely
agree with that one.
Topic tagging as well, making things easier to find, what people are talking about, go back to. We all like a bit of tagging and organisation.
Yeah, I think it's an important one for discovery, because we've spoken about this a lot over the last year, actually, about the downfall of Clubhouse was the fact that it's just impossible to figure out what was good content or what wasn't, or what was relevant content at least. Topic tagging will really help address that. It's an interesting one.
This is looking like a different platform. Testing tweet reactions. So this is, more engagement, more like TikTok, more like Instagram, I think, in testing different types of reactions on tweets. Whether it will stay, whether it won't, I'm not sure this is a big test for them, really.
No, but it's along that same theme of being able to reply with reels, as we saw on Instagram. It's all about just trying to nurture other forms of engagement. But it doesn't feel a very kind of native Twitter thing, but it just goes to show all of the platforms are thinking of engagement beyond likes and comments, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Tweetdeck is Twitter's own management platform. I used it many years ago when it was first introduced, they're making improvements, which again is another interesting move because they've added features to their own platform to be able to do a lot more natively, but the fact that they've still got Tweetdeck going and adding features to that, interesting move. I'm not sure it's their core business.
No, but I think it's like for social listening, it's such an important thing, especially if you just want to understand what's happening around your brand, the conversation around your brand or your category. I presume or hope most people know about Tweetdeck that are on this, because even whether you use Twitter as a publishing platform or not, understanding the sentiment of the stuff that's happening in your industry, super important. And you could spend a fortune on social listening tools, but the reality is Tweetdeck gives you 80+% of really what users are saying. It's a incredible listening platform. So they've just made it easier to use. So yeah, I think it's a good one.
NFTs, this is the word alongside metaverse that's going to dominate this year and beyond, isn't it? Not just Twitter doing this. I think Instagram and Facebook are looking as well about enabling NFT displays on our user profiles as our avatar pictures.
Yeah, there's a whole conversation to be had, another session about NFTs at another time. But this is very early days. It's not going to change our strategies right now, but it is going to be helpful to start thinking about what NFTs and the broader metaverse will mean if you're kind of nerdy in the world of social. But yeah, maybe that's one for another session.
Flocks. I love the words that Twitter are using. This is a new one, and I think this is a question that I often get asked when you're posting on social media profiles, is like, can it only go to a certain group? Can it just, be visible to a select group of people? And most of the time, the answer to that is no. And most of the time, I would probably respond with, this is public platforms. People can screenshot it, can share it. So if you don't want the world to see it, then don't post it, perhaps. But it is an often asked for feature. It's interesting that Twitter are testing this out. And it kind of just made me think back to the days of Google Plus, where you could post out to a specific circle. We know what happened with Google Plus. So again, I'm not sure this is cool for Twitter, and actually they're not taking this from another platform. So I wonder why they're doing this, but they probably have got a purpose, and it may be connected with monetization.
I think, yeah, and it's might well be connected into this as well, because this is quite interesting.
So I haven't really looked at this too much, Andy. I don't know if you have the Twitter communities and how, again, it's just trying to expand Twitter beyond the people that you regularly follow and scroll past in your news feed.
Yeah, it will become more of a focus for them this year. They launched it towards the end of last year, so it's now come to Android, so improved accessibility. But yeah, at a high level, it's their alternative to Facebook groups. Because Twitter threads, as we know, have got kind of popular, right? So it becomes quite hard to follow a big conversation that's happening on Twitter. So setting up a community to discuss a certain topic, it seems like a more natural place for topics, for discussions around a certain topic to come together. So I do like the idea of this. And as we've said right at the beginning, social media is becoming increasingly more community driven. And I like that very much.
LinkedIn. We have a few new LinkedIn features, and yes, what a surprise. They did tell us they were testing it, but audio rooms are coming to LinkedIn. They announced this year, so relatively new. Again, I think it's about thinking about how this can fit into your for your audience, for your content. Beth saying that she loves audio rooms on LinkedIn already. Taking the feature, Clubhouse fleets, it's on LinkedIn. Similar to Facebook as well, they have done a lot over the last 12-18 months in terms of their events feature, in terms of rolling out LinkedIn Live and how people can incorporate that as part of their activity on LinkedIn. And now having multi-person live streams directly within the platform is a big move for them as well. And again, video interaction live, it's following the same patterns. The live streams.
Do you want to say anything more on that?
I mean, I use lives on LinkedIn. I think they're popular. You get the notifications. I think if it's not something that you're using, then it's definitely something to have a look at as a feature. Yeah,
and it's just like the view of how live streams will look in the feed, as you can see here in this kind of own separate window, is quite good. Live streams, in fact, are up 170% year on year for LinkedIn. So it's definitely increasing in engagement. As you can see, all of the platforms starting to focus more on live streams. But this one I like too.
Do you? Because
other than the constant notifications, the constant notifications are tiresome. That is for sure.
So LinkedIn newsletter feature has been around for a while for some users. It's one of those things that took quite a long time to roll out. In essence, it's not hugely different from publishing a long form post on LinkedIn, apart from the fact that people can subscribe to it, which means that they would get more notifications in their inbox about your newsletter. When they added creator as a profile option last year, and many people switched to it, and then all of a sudden LinkedIn rolled out the newsletter feature to creator users, my notifications was filled. I think there was about 20 or 30 newsletters one day that I would have been able to subscribe to. It is good as a format. It's longer form content. You can use it, get subscribers, build up an audience. For me personally, I don't have control over the list. I don't see that list. So if you're already doing email newsletters and have control of your mailing list, I would have a think about how they interact, whether you need to shift over to it. And it's one of those all new feature, I'm going to do a newsletter, that seem to really happen in a week or 2 weeks. I would argue that if that was a content type you wanted to do anyway, you know, why wait for a LinkedIn feature to enable you to do a newsletter?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. The other thing I'd add to it though is LinkedIn seem to be pushing it quite heavily, and it is a nice way of getting your content served guaranteed to a certain audience. Yeah, it's no replacement for an actual email subscriber list for sure, but as a kind of interim middle period between like your follower base and posting content, your newsletters over here, it's kind of, or your email newsletters over there, it kind of sits quite nicely in the middle of like your closer fans that you can guarantee that you're going to serve them content. Right, I'm going to go fire through the remaining networks for the next 5 minutes, and let's go see what questions we have.
Yeah.
Right, let's talk about TikTok. What an incredible statistic this is. In 2021, they were the most visited website above everything else, toppling google.com. Unbelievable. Gives you an idea for where the direction of travel TikTok in 2022 will be. So they're already forecasting they're going to hit 1.5 billion monthly active users by March. I would bet on them overtaking Instagram by the end of this year. The march of TikTok is unstoppable. And spending is up 77%. This isn't ad spending. This is spending on the platform, spending with creators, buying products on the platform. Really important, because you can see TikTok already capturing that opportunity we spoke about right at the start of this, which is all about the creator economy and social commerce. TikTok are absolutely leading on this. But TikTok are not completely immune from testing and trying out, or at least replicating stuff that's happening on other platforms. This is the popular Twitter feature. So testing out resharing posts. Often TikTok tests do actually make it into production. So it's an important one to keep note of. And it's a nice way that we can start to think about how we can become more active on TikTok by actually resharing others' content and putting our own narrative to it. It's a nice and easy way to get started. So I like that. Live stream shopping, they launched their first UK event. That was in the middle of December. So as you can see, live stream shopping, we've seen the growth of live streaming. We talk about this, the fact that live streaming is the most engaged with content type above all of them, above video, above in-feed, above carousel. Live stream video gets more engagement on every platform than any other content type. So clearly live stream and e-commerce go hand in hand. So you're going to see lots more about that on a TikTok. How the TikTok algorithm works, I'll let you read the slide on this when we send it over, because this is a half-an-hour chat in its own right. But fundamentally, the most important thing that TikTok care about is the time that users spend on the product. So if you're producing content that people watch to the end, that is all you need to think about. So TikTok will serve your content if people are watching to the end of it. So focus on shorter form content that has some form of hook towards the end. Because if people are watching your video, then get served something else, TikTok love that. So that means that your content is going to be served to more people. Watch time, as it seems based on this, is more important than likes and engagement. So that's a really important differentiating factor between TikTok algorithmic preferences versus all of the other platforms, which are prioritized around engagement, particularly comments. So that's a really interesting thing. Create content that people are going to watch through to the end. I mean, it's not groundbreaking in terms of a recommendation, but yeah, it will serve you well for your TikTok strategy. They're testing out a load of stuff at the moment, so I'm going to fly through some of this. They're testing out new profile discovery tools. It seems like they're in this stage of the cycle where they're trying to get people over from other networks. The kind of early adopter crew have adopted TikTok, and it's become a platform with increasing time spent on the platform. Now, as the product matures, it's more about how can we capture the majority of the audience and bring them over from other platforms. So being able to share your TikTok profile is a new test, which is going to encourage more people to follow your profile. So they're really going into kind of audience growth mode, which is a really good thing for us to know, because we know that if we start to focus on TikTok as part of our content strategy, we know that more and more people are coming to the platform at a quicker rate than all of the other platforms. So which means that our content is going to be constantly served to new people. And that's the important thing. TikTok have been testing out stories. So as I said, not immune for copying other people's features, but that's gone to its next stage where they're actually bringing stories, and it looks like they will be putting this live in the next coming months. Stories will be a separate area within the For You page. So if stories is a format that we already create content in, that's going to then become a slightly easier transition for us to start becoming more frequent and active on TikTok, because we already know the stories format, which will be exactly the same as we're familiar with on other platforms. Spoken loads about the benefits of working in collaboration with others, spoke about the importance of communities today. You know, I won't read all the statistics here because, I mean, this is TikTok data, so it's not exactly objective. But the reality is, if you're working with other people that are native TikTok creators, it's a little surprise that your content does better when it's built in collaboration with others. And for me, in terms of our future content strategies, we're going to need to think about more how we can create content in collaboration with others. It's going to be essential for our growth moving forward. So a couple of other data points on this. Logging into TikTok every day has increased by 54% over the last year. And the most important action that people are starting to do is that more and more people are creating content, because you don't necessarily want lots of people coming to the platform. There's more and more people starting to create content on the platform, which just goes to show there is a kind of a desire for people to express themselves, which means it's going to become more important about this whole remixing thing, or replying to comments with a TikTok, because that's, you know, the same feature they offer as, you know, in comparison to the one that we saw earlier from Instagram. So lots of stuff happening on TikTok. Testing fan subscriptions, as has Instagram been, as Luann was talking about. Huge amount that's happening in terms of like the creator economy. So Pinterest, one thing on this, or two things on this actually, in encouraging creator discovery. So this is a new thing. So when you're searching a particular topic or brand, and the interesting thing about Pinterest, just as a side note, the majority of searches are brand related, which is really encouraging. Now profiles will be surfaced, so it becomes easier for people to find your profile based on a certain search term and then follow you. And of course, if you want to start publishing more on Pinterest, we've just launched a feature this week, which allows you to do your Pinterest publishing on Content Cal. And if you're not that familiar with Pinterest and strategies, I'm going to share a link in a bit for a Pinterest strategy session that we're running. That's all about how to build a content strategy for Pinterest, if it sounds of interest. Snapchat, just one thing. This is the last update. I know I'm whizzing through these other networks. Really simple stuff where they're encouraging really simple polls. That's just there to drive audience engagement, and also these Bitmoji reactions as well. So like once again with Snapchat, the focus is really in the 14 to 18 age range. And that focus is really about how they can kind of simplify interaction as much as they possibly can. Oh yeah, there is one more. Always forget about this one. Clubhouse. Saved replays, you know, nice feature, same as what we saw with Twitter audio spaces, means that listening to content and recording content becomes much more accessible. And there we go. We have done it. 6 main themes before we hand back and look at any questions, etc. One thing that's probably become abundantly clear, big changes ahead for Instagram. 2022 is probably going to be the year that we see biggest change on Instagram. Like all of the things we mentioned, I was going to reel them off, but yeah, I'll be more mindful of time. We need to keep a very close eye on Instagram because our strategies might need to change. The importance of creators and communities continues to grow. Definitely spoken about this quite a lot. And realistically, how we work with those creators and the communities that we ingratiate ourselves with is going to become so critical for us as brands. We're going to start to see the pivot away from company pages, posting out content to your own followers, where that will still be a part of a strategy, but you'll start to see that strategy overtaken by those that you can work with, because the best way of building trust in your brand is by working within communities that already have that inherent trust within them. So that's a really important thing. Social commerce set to triple. If you're a retail business, particularly, this is your time. This is the opportunity that you've been waiting for within social. And this is going to represent any retail and commercially or consumer-led businesses. Social represents an incredible opportunity now. Live streaming grows in importance. We've spoken about it becoming the top engaged with type of content format. And you can see all of the platforms really focus on live streaming. We've seen it with the new badges on Instagram. We've seen it with multi-party live streams on Facebook, multi-party live streams on LinkedIn. They're all at it because they know it's a really high value content theme. Remixing and video reactions are going to become the new engagement benchmark. As we evolve beyond likes and comments, we start to think about how content can create its own life of its own through people doing a different take or remix of it, or being able to, you as a kind of content creator, being able to engage more deeply with the comments by replying through video. And the final thing is probably a bit more kind of high level, but this whole trend towards self-expression, as has been driven by TikTok, because we're seeing more people create content on TikTok than any other platform. And that's going to drive a growth of user-generated content. And for us as brands, businesses, whether we're B2B or B2C, how we leverage and use user-generated content is going to be so essential for our content marketing strategies. So lots of stuff to think about. I'm going to stop talking. But yeah, Luann, what was your kind of main key takeaways or thoughts off the back of that?
Yeah, we're right. We're going to see big changes this year. I think we know that the world has been slightly different for the last 2 years, but I think we're coming out the other side in terms of kind of back to more business as usual focus, developments, innovation. And we saw a lot in 2021, but just really consolidating the direction of the platforms. And interestingly, some of the questions that have been coming up in the chat now are, what are the demographics of the platforms for older audiences? How's TikTok going to change? I've shared a link to datareportal.com, which for me is my go-to on the latest stats. We do often cover the demographics and stats. We always do something at the beginning of each month, but the world changes. It's about understanding. In these sessions, we're trying to give you kind of one foot into the future, as well as consolidating what you're doing now. And our answers will always be, it depends. Look at your own data and test things out. So there's always lots to consider. One question that we haven't touched on, which I think was probably towards the end of last year, but Aoife asked about Twitter professional accounts in the same way that Facebook had done a professional account. Yes, they have opened up for Twitter professional accounts, a bit like Instagram. You go in and change a setting. It's only open to real people, so it's not open to if you have a Twitter account for your dog or something like that. It's real people only. I did it back end of last year. It gave me a few more fields to fill in my profile. Haven't seen any changes as a result of that, but I'm sure something is coming once they've done that initial setup of it.
Got a question from Katrin here.
Yeah.
LinkedIn impressions on my company page has dived since November. Do you have any suggestions on how to counteract this? LinkedIn seems to be focusing more and more on personal profiles, particularly since the dawn of the creator profile as well, bringing lots more features to this. And because LinkedIn are bringing lots more features to creator profiles, because they're focusing more on the creator economy, as a result, naturally, that gets more prioritization. So if you really want to get your messages heard, then company pages are not necessarily the way to do it, which, you know, that presents an awkward thing for our strategy. It's the reality, and I think we'll see this as a trend in general, where general business communications are going to be led more from, you know, a personal branding perspective, rather than company pages and followers on company pages. It's going to be more individual led, and that in itself is going to present quite a challenge for a lot of businesses. But I think that challenge is a good thing, because social should be social. It's never intended to be driven by businesses. So it's about humanizing a brand as much as possible. So I like it as a theme.
I do. I would just say, Catherine, if it's since November, just remember the time of year. We had Thanksgiving in the States, then you had Christmas, and many people did this year. I'm pleased to say, take 2 weeks off time. So it's always good to have a look at your stats and look at your patterns, but I wouldn't worry about December stats too much having dropped, because we really only had half a month.
That's a fair point as well. That's a little more balanced than mine.
Yeah. No, the balance of company and personal pages, but in terms of business data around November, you know, unless you were in retail, you wouldn't have been active on LinkedIn. You'd have probably been more over on the social comment site. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about 1 month of dropping, but keep an eye on it.
Yeah, and thanks for responding as well, Catherine. And to be fair, it's not always as absolute as what I say. Company personal profiles will always do better for sure, but you know, as Eva says, it does depend on an industry. It's not always completely level playing field, right? Some industries are naturally more engaging, depends on content, etc. Lot of nuance. But one thing I did mention, there's a couple of links just to check in the comments. So I've popped in a link for the slides for today. We send out all of the follow-ups anyway. So that happens. Sophie, as you can see, Sophie Thompson, who is our wonderful content marketer here at Content Cal, does all of that follow-up stuff, the difficult stuff, basically. I've added a link to the slide share anyway. And also Sophie's added the link that I put in as well anyway, but she's done it much better, which is a 2022 strategy session. And if you want to get more into Pinterest, we're running that session. I think it's this week or next week. I think it's next week, actually. Next Thursday. So if you want to join. Let's do one more question. We got 3 minutes. So Melanie's got it before the end. Really struggling to get more than 20 likes on our Instagram post. We have 12,000 followers, are posting 1 post a day. Right. Luann, any thought on that initially?
Without knowing your industry, your audience, what you're posting, my biggest tip are you asking a question? Are you asking people to comment? Are you asking them to engage with it? The more that you can kind of tell people what you want them to do after they've seen your post, that's usually the quickest win for me. Yeah.
So no, change your content formats would be another thing. So if you're doing the same thing and getting the same results, switch it up. It's a good sign to switch it up. So if it's single image, think about mixing up to video. We've seen that video is performing well. Ruby's already mentioned that the fact of posting 1 post a day sometimes slows down engagement. It's not. We've moved away from the days of social being about volume, of saying you need to get 7 posts a day. In fact, as is the case I often find on LinkedIn, performance has got much better since I've reduced my posting frequency. So you might see the similar trend as Ruby mentioned. Asking questions, trying to encourage engagement. Comments are hugely important. Mixing up with live streams, we've seen how important that one is. Absolutely try that. 20 hashtags, we've seen that. So using tools like besthashtags.com to find out the most relevant and popular hashtags. There's another suggestion. And then also working in collaboration with others. Go live with someone else. So I could go live with Luann, for example, on Instagram, and our content goes into multiple people's feeds. So we extend our audience and our reach. And look at the times you're posting as well. You know, we've seen that there was 3 key posting windows that do well. Switch up your post to change it to experiment with a different window. There's about 10 suggestions off the bat.
And imagine what you could get out of a strategy session if you got that in 10 seconds.
There you go. Alana's asked, can I shed any light on UGC? I think we'll have to do a whole session dedicated on user-generated content. Huge opportunity in that. And Laura, I'm going to say one final comment to that. It's like, what's the best number of hashtags to use on LinkedIn? None. They're rubbish. Go on, Luann, you're a LinkedIn.
I would say, think about how you use LinkedIn. Do you search LinkedIn by hashtags? Most people will say no. Journalists, industry researchers, marketers may be searching for content by hashtags. I wouldn't do more than 3. It looks cluttered, and I would separate them out and put them at the end, because for me, when you're having hyperlinks within the text, blue bits, black bits, it makes it hard to read. So I would try and use a couple of hashtags if you want your content to get found, but no, certainly no more than 3 at the end of a post.
Yeah, and my personal view, because there's a lot of, just to be clear, this is personal views, not fact. I will only consider hashtags on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Everything else, the typical user experience is not driven by hashtag searches. It's just driven by feed and the people that you follow. So that would be my preference. I've never seen any kind of empirical evidence to suggest why using hashtags on Facebook or LinkedIn drives any engagement growth. And LinkedIn is the platform I spend most time on. But Luann is also a LinkedIn trainer. So you know, the true answer is probably somewhere in between both ends of the spectrum that Luann and I represent. But anyway, we're overrun, and I could speak about this stuff forever, as you all know. So
Thank you
today. But thank you so much for joining. Yeah,
we'll be back next month.
Yeah, we should have a link for next month, but I should have prepared that in advance. But I'm too useless to do that. So look out in your emails for the link for next month, and we will see you in February. Take care, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.